In this session, we're going to look at prompting in a professional context. And my name is James Johnson. I'm a web consultant. I specialize in B2B online marketing and analytics and data visualization for semiconductor companies. In this session, all the demos are live. So with large language models, you're never 100% sure how they're going to respond, which makes it a bit more interesting, but let's dive in. So I'm going to pretend for the demos that we have a company called Qualitech and we have a complaint. I brought your Qualitech Pro headphones 3 weeks ago and they stopped working after 5 days. I contacted support twice and got no response. I want a full refund immediately. This is unacceptable. I'm a grump. Okay, so naively, you might write a prompt like this. Write a response to an angry customer about a return of headphones. I'm quite surprised how often I've seen people prompting like this. Let's just see how it responds. Now, large language models are really, really good at writing, and they're increasingly good at this kind of thing. But of course, the problem with this kind of prompt is that it gives no background information at all. So it's not going to be responding to what the customer wants. It's not going to be responding in your company style or with company policy. So this is a slightly better prompt where we give some background. We put the email itself in, and with this response, it should give a response to that actual email. So it's got the person's name in at least, and it will refer to what their problems were. But still, this company has a particular policy with this kind of email. So let's go on to the next style of prompt. So here, one thing, often with prompts, you'll want to give quite a lot of different types of information. And one way that you can do that to make it clear to the large language model which type of information you're giving is by wrapping them in this kind of little tag. And you can put any words you want in here, really, and it'll understand them. Or you could just write start email and stop email at the end or whatever. But if you've then got other types of information that you want to add in, you can do that to those as well. So it makes it really clear what's the information that's being provided and what the prompt is. So here we've got the company policy. Our company policy is not to offer refunds or repairs if they have accepted our terms and conditions, which they have to do in order to use them. Keep the response as concise as possible, under 100 words. Do not offer to replace the product. Do not mention the warranty. I am head of customer support. Use a formal legal tone. Act like a lawyer. Okay, so with that prompt, you'll see we get a completely different response. And it says, we acknowledge receipt of your correspondence. Please be advised. Accordingly, your request for refund cannot be granted. So you can see we've got a very different response to the previous ones. And in a more serious situation, you might have your own brand style of writing, which you will put in there. You might have a more serious company policy than this one. If you get lots of this kind of email that you need to deal with, then you can create a document specifically for dealing with them. So I've done a little one here, company policy.pdf, and uploaded it. And in this case, I've uploaded that, which gives a lot of background information, plus just the email. And now if we look at how it responds, you'll see that it gives a response with our policy, and it gives the address, and it's literally enough to just be able to copy that and email it back to the person who's complaining, right? So, in summary, then, um, give as much background information as possible. So, whatever documentation you have, um, put it in there, because that'll make it easier for the LLM to know how it's going to respond. Give it a role. So in this case, I said act like a lawyer, but you might want to say act like a friendly customer support person, or in other contexts, you might say act like a marketing copywriter. Um, and giving a role like that is a really, really good way to modify how the large language model will respond. And then specify the format of the response. So in this case, I've given a number of words that I want, but you might say, make this as bullet points, or do it as a Word document, or whatever. So basically give as much background detail as possible, so that the large language model knows exactly what it needs to do. So that's basic prompting. Let's talk a bit more about when things get a bit more complex. One of the most important things to understand when prompting is context, and context in the world of large language models has very specific meaning. So in this table, you see these numbers for input and output. The input there is known as the context window. And we've seen in previous talks how content is split up into tokens. So the content window is number of tokens, and a token is kind of like a word. Some words are split into multiple tokens. But you can see that the context window now for large language models are really big. So with Google Gemini, you can pretty much upload a whole book, and that goes into context. There's also maximums for the output, but that tends not to be a problem as commonly. So let's look at another prompt here. Give me 3 ideas for promoting my jewelry store. Again, not a particularly good prompt because we're not giving much background. But it comes up with these ideas, but because I haven't given it enough background, it says in-store events. I mean, it's just a website. Let's just leave it like that. So now it's given responses that are appropriate just for a website. I should have put that in the original prompt. But the point I want to make is that the context now is all of this, right? So all of this goes back into the model each time I continue in this thread. So if there's stuff that's wrong in this thread, then that gets fed back in again, and that kind of pollutes the context for going forwards. So when you have a response that's not good, it's often a good idea to actually just start a completely new thread. In other words, click on the new chat button and start again. And if you're just starting exploring an idea, then just try and think how you can improve the prompt so it's the large language model is more likely to respond. But let's imagine we continued that thread on about ideas about the jewelry store. Um, what happens is that the context gets longer and longer as you progress. And of course, you've got that context window, but you get it affects the results further on down the longer the context window gets. And that can be a good thing because it's understanding exactly what you want, but also it can be bad because there can be stuff in there that you don't want. in the context. So a really good thing to do is to summarize your context. So say something like, um, summarize the top 3 ideas in this thread, and then you take its response and you start a new thread with that. So you're priming the thread with the best of the previous thread, and this is quite a powerful technique. Okay, so context is really important. Keep your context as focused as possible. Create new threads often, especially if things go wrong. Clean your context every so often by summarizing the current thread and restarting with a little summary of all the kind of best of. These kind of, with all of these, large language models are changing rapidly. So with the latest version of Claude, it actually does this automatically in the background. So you might think, okay, well, I don't need to do this kind of thing anymore. But of course, it's doing its own summary that you don't see, which means that it may be putting stuff in the context that you actually don't want in there. And it's always best to keep the context as focused as possible. And the advantage of asking it to summarize and then getting the response and starting the thread again is that you can edit the response it gives to take out anything you don't want or add in anything that it's missed. So even though the large language models are getting better at this kind of thing, it's still a good idea to understand how they're working and to really make sure that the context is really clean. It makes a huge difference. So moving on, back to our dodgy Qualitech company. So in this case, we're uploading an Excel spreadsheet and asking it to create a board-ready one-pager with the most important metrics and charts and a clear recommendation. Now, this is a short prompt, but it's not a simple prompt, right? This is actually a multi-stage process. If you think through what you would have to do yourself to do what you're asking here, you would have to do all kinds of stuff. You would have to define what the business goals are, what the KPIs are, calculate the metrics, create the charts. So in a single response, it's not going to give you a good response, right? And you'll see here, I'm using here ChatGPT 5. It hasn't done everything that I wanted. It hasn't created charts, for example. It's given a very generic response. There's almost certainly errors in here if I go through and check line by line. So how do you prevent that with complex prompts? You see here the same thing. We're uploading the Excel spreadsheet again, and a longer prompt that goes into a lot more detail. It says about cleaning up the data, changing the format of the dates so they're all consistent, removing duplicates, all this kind of stuff, creating goes into more details about how it creates the charts by doing pivot tables and that kind of stuff. This is still a bad prompt because you're still asking it to do a load of different things in a single prompt, right? And again, it might give a slightly better response than last time, but it still won't give you what you want. And there will be errors in here. What can happen if you do prompting like this, where you're asking it to do multiple things, is that it will respond and you'll see, oh, it's kind of right, but this bit is wrong. So you ask it to correct that bit, and then you get into this loop of what you're doing is just correcting the responses that it gives each time. And that means that you're getting a context full of kind of bad stuff, and it won't be responding very well all the way through, because all you're doing is trying to correct errors that it's made. So it's much better to actually think through how you would do something and give it one thing to do at a time. So in this case, you might say, first clean up the data in the Excel spreadsheets by removing duplicates. Then you might say, convert the dates to the same format. Then, just step by step, one simple thing each time. And it makes a huge, huge difference, because what happens then is that every time it will do exactly what you want. And you'll find that you can keep going like this for a couple of hours, and it'll always be doing exactly what you want, and you'll get exactly what you want at the end of it, rather than kind of fighting the large language model, always saying, no, you've done that wrong, change this, change that, which makes this awful messy context, right? So with complex tasks, break them down one thing at a time. And it's really amazing how well this approach works. So in summary then, give as much background as possible. Give the model a role. So say, act like a graphic designer, act like a professional photographer, whatever you want, act like a copywriter, whatever it is that it's doing, think who would be the best person to do this and give it that role. Specify exactly what you want it to produce, the format of the response. Keep your context focused. Always keep in mind that context, try and keep it really clean and correct all the time. Start new threads regularly is a really useful technique. You'll find that as you get good at prompting, you need to do that less, because you'll know how to prompt it in such a way it'll give you exactly what you want. And then there's really positive benefits for that, because then the whole thread actually gives the large language model a really good context, and it's a real joy when that happens. Summarizing and restarting is good when your thread gets really long, and then breaking complex tasks down, so you're just giving it one thing to do at a time, a simple thing, and yeah, that's the process. So if you do all of those things, you'll find that the large language models are capable of amazing things, and you'll get them doing what you want the first time. It does take some effort on your part, but it's really worth it.